The headquarters of Evershield Industries was quiet at night. The usual hum of employees rushing between departments, the chatter of phones, and the clinking of keyboards had faded into silence hours ago. Only the occasional flicker of security cameras, and the low buzz of fluorescent hallway lights hinted at life inside the vast building. It was the kind of silence that made every footstep echo like a drumbeat. For most CEOs, nights like these would be spent at home, surrounded by comfort and luxury. But for Adrian Hale, the man who had built Evershield from a modest security services startup into a nationwide empire, comfort was never the goal. He had decided, weeks ago, to go undercover. He wanted to know what really happened when no one thought the boss was watching. Tonight, he wore an old gray hoodie, jeans that had seen better days, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. No expensive suit, no polished shoes. No one would ever guess the identity of the man walking slowly through the dimly lit halls. To the occasional passerby, he looked like a janitor, maybe a late shift technician. That was exactly the point. Adrian had always believed that leaders lost touch when they became too comfortable in boardrooms. He wanted to see his company through the eyes of the people who kept it running when the world wasn't watching. The cleaners, the security guards, the overnight staff who rarely received a word of thanks. As he made his rounds that night, Adrian's footsteps carried him past the security office. The door was half open, and a thin, almost ghostly beam of light flickered across the floor. He paused. It wasn't the steady glow of a desk lamp or the brightness of a phone screen. It was uneven, wavering, almost like a flashlight. Curiosity tugged at him. He stepped closer, careful not to make a sound, and leaned against the frame of the door. Inside sat a young man in a faded Navy security uniform. His badge read, Marcus Reed. The guard couldn't have been more than 24 or 25. With clothes, cropped hair and a posture that spoke of both fatigue and determination. But what caught Adrian's attention wasn't the man's appearance. It was what he was doing. Marcus wasn't dozing at his station, as so many night guards did after long shifts. He wasn't watching videos on his phone to pass the time. Instead, he had a stack of thick, worn-out textbooks open in front of him. Pages were dog-eared. Margins scribbled with notes, yellow highlighter bleeding across lines of dense paragraphs. His brow furrowed as his eyes darted across the page, and his lips moved silently as though he were repeating key phrases to himself. The flashlight, propped awkwardly between a water bottle and the edge of the desk, flickered with each movement of the batteries inside. It barely cast enough light to cover half the page, forcing Marcus to adjust constantly, angling his head just right to read. Adrian stood frozen in the doorway watching. There was something deeply human about the scene, something raw. Here was a young man, working the kind of job most people dismissed as background noise, straining his eyes in poor light to carve out a future for himself. Every line he underlined, every note he scribbled was a quiet rebellion against the hand life had dealt him. The CEO's throat tightened. He knew struggle when he saw it. Memories stirred, his own late nights, years ago, when he had been just another nameless worker, balancing invoices by day and business textbooks by night, often under the dim glow of a borrowed desk lamp. He remembered the exhaustion, the loneliness, the feeling that no one saw how hard he was fighting. And now, standing in the shadows, he felt like he was looking at a reflection of his younger self. A clock somewhere in the hall chimed softly, marking the hour past midnight. Marcus didn't flinch. He kept reading, jotting down words with a dull pencil, his eyes heavy but determined. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, his shoes scuffed. But there was pride in the way he sat, like he wasn't just a guard in a silent building. He was a man chasing something bigger. Adrian's instinct was to step forward, to introduce himself, to ask what Marcus was studying. But something held him back. If he revealed too much too soon, he'd lose the truth of the moment. Part of going undercover was seeing people, as they were when no one else was watching. So instead, he remained quiet, leaning against the wall in the shadows just out of sight. Marcus turned a page, sighed, and whispered softly to himself, "Just a few more chapters. You can do this." The words, spoken to no one but himself, pierced Adrian's chest. They carried exhaustion, yes, but also resilience. A kind of grit that couldn't be faked. A few minutes later, the flashlight flickered and dimmed. Marcus tapped it against the desk, coaxing a little more life from the weak batteries. and angled it again over the pages. His persistence was almost painful to watch. Adrian finally pulled back, his mind racing. This was no ordinary employee. He had seen countless people sit in that chair, guarding empty hallways for a paycheck. But Marcus was guarding something else too, his dream. And he was doing it in silence, with no applause, no recognition, no one cheering him on. Adrian walked away quietly, his footsteps muffled against the carpet. But his heart was louder than ever. Something inside him had shifted. He hadn't expected much from this undercover visit. Maybe a few conversations, a reminder of the company's heartbeat. But tonight, he had discovered a story unfolding in front of him. One that, he sensed, was about to change two lives, Marcus's, and perhaps his own. The next night Adrian Hale returned to the building, still dressed in his plain clothes, still a shadow in his own empire. But unlike the night before, when curiosity had carried him quietly past Marcus's desk, tonight he felt something stronger pulling him back. An urge to know this young man's story. He didn't want to just observe from the shadows anymore. He wanted to hear the words, the dreams, the truth that Marcus carried with him when the world wasn't looking. The building was as quiet as before. Its silence broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the faint crackle of security monitors. Adrian's footsteps guided him down the same hallway. His memory tracing the moment when he had seen Marcus bent over his books with nothing but a flickering flashlight. Sure enough, when he reached the security office, there was Marcus again. Same uniform. Same desk. But this time, the flashlight lay flat on its side, almost dead, and Marcus had leaned closer to the single glow from the hallway bulb outside the door. His pencil scratched slowly against the paper. His lips pressed into a thin line of concentration. Adrian lingered in the doorway for a moment, debating how to begin. He couldn't just say, "Hi, I'm the CEO of this company. Why are you studying here in the dark?" That would frighten the poor guy out of his chair. No, he needed to come in as one worker to another, plain and ordinary. So, with a soft knock against the doorframe, he stepped forward. "Burning the midnight oil, huh?" Adrian said gently, his voice carrying just enough warmth to keep it casual. Marcus startled, his eyes darting up, almost guilty, as if he'd been caught breaking a rule. He quickly slid his notebook over the thick textbook, covering half the page. "Oh, yeah, I guess. Just keeping busy," he mumbled. Adrian raised his hands in a disarming gesture. "Don't worry, I'm not here to report you or anything. Just passing through. Saw you last night too, you looked pretty focused." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, studying the man before him. Adrian's clothes didn't scream authority. His tone wasn't sharp, he seemed more like a fellow night worker, maybe a technician or maintenance staff, than anyone important. Finally, Marcus sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, well, it's the only time I get to study. Daytime's full of shifts, bills, and life, you know." Adrian nodded slowly. "I do know." He pulled out a chair across from the desk and sat down, careful not to seem imposing. "What are you studying?" There was hesitation at first, like Marcus was weighing whether to brush him off. But something in Adrian's steady gaze seemed to ease him. He pulled the notebook back, revealing the textbook beneath. The cover was cracked and faded, the title barely legible. Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement Foundations. Adrian's brows lifted. Criminal Justice. Marcus nodded, almost sheepishly. "Yeah. Trying to finish my degree. Been chipping away at it one class at a time. Whenever I can afford it. My dream's to get into the police academy." There was no bravado in his voice, no showmanship. Just quiet conviction, the kind that came from carrying a dream in silence for years. "Why law enforcement?" Adrian asked, leaning forward. For a moment Marcus's eyes softened, drifting somewhere distant. "My dad. He was an officer. Not the kind who sat behind a desk. Either. He was out there in the neighborhoods, walking beats, talking to people. He believed that protecting a community meant knowing it, being part of it. When I was a kid, he'd bring me along to community events. Block parties, safety drives. People respect him because he cared." His voice caught slightly, and he looked down. "He died when I was 14, heart attack, just gone. Ever since then, I've wanted to wear the badge. Not just for me, but for him." Adrian felt his chest tighten. He saw the fire in Marcus's eyes, the same fire he had once carried himself when no one else believed in him. "So you study here, during your shifts? Adrian asked softly. Marcus gave a small, embarrassed chuckle. Yeah. I mean, I keep an eye on the cameras and patrol the floors, but when it's quiet, I use the time. Can't afford tutors or fancy courses. Half the books I've got are second-hand. Some of them are so old they've got coffee stains from whoever owned them before me. But knowledge is knowledge. Right? Right. Adrian said, his voice low. And it looks like you've got plenty of determination to make up for what you don't have in resources. Marcus shrugged, almost dismissively. Though his eyes betrayed a flicker of pride. I try. Sometimes it feels impossible. Working nights, sending money home to help my mom. Scraping by with what little I save. I wonder if I'll ever actually make it. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying the young man. The tired circles under his eyes, the worn-down uniform, the stubborn resolve etched into his features. He saw a fighter, not one with fists, but with grit. You ever think of giving up? Adrian asked carefully. Marcus looked him straight in the eye. Every day. And every day I remind myself that giving up won't get me closer to where I want to be. My dad used to say, character isn't shown when things are easy. It's shown when everything is stacked against you. So, yeah, I think of quitting. But I don't. The room fell quiet. For a long moment, only the hum of the security monitor filled the air. Adrian felt something stirring inside him. He had come here to understand his company, to see if the workers at the bottom felt overlooked. But what he was finding was something deeper. This wasn't just an employee scraping by. This was a man with a dream, a man clawing his way toward a future bigger than his present. He wanted to tell Marcus who he really was. He wanted to say, I can help you. I can change your life tonight. But he bit back the words. Timing mattered. Trust mattered. Instead, Adrian offered a small, encouraging smile. Sounds like your father would be proud. Really proud. Marcus's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He blinked a few times and looked away, pretending to adjust the dying flashlight. I hope so, he said quietly. Adrian stood slowly, pushing the chair back. Well, don't let me keep you from your studies. I'll let you get back to it. But, I'll say this. You keep at it the way you are, and one day, you're going to get where you're headed. Don't doubt that. Marcus looked up, surprise flickering in his expression at the kindness of a stranger. Thanks, I appreciate that. Really. As Adrian walked out of the security office, leaving Marcus once again hunched over his book, he felt the weight of what he had just heard. This wasn't just a conversation. It was the beginning of something. And deep down, he knew the choice he made about Marcus Reed could very well change a life forever. The nights that followed felt different. For Adrian Hale. Walking into the building no longer felt like a detached mission to check on the staff. It felt personal now. Each step down the quiet hallways was a step closer to Marcus Reed. The young man he had discovered hunched over textbooks, chasing a dream with nothing but grit and a fading flashlight. But admiration alone wasn't enough. Adrian wasn't the kind of man who made decisions based on emotion alone. He had built an empire by testing people. By observing not what they said but what they did when the world wasn't watching. And so, quietly, almost without Marcus realizing it, Adrian began to put him to the test. The first test, the wallet. It began with something small. One evening, as Marcus stepped out to do his rounds, Adrian deliberately left a worn leather wallet near the security desk. Inside, he placed 2 crisp $100 bills and a couple of ID cards, fake ones, prepared just for this experiment. He lingered around the corner, out of sight. His pulse strangely quick for a man who had handled $1,000,000 negotiations. Marcus returned a few minutes later, humming faintly under his breath. When his eyes fell on the wallet, his brow furrowed. He picked it up, turned it over, and opened it carefully. Adrian watched as Marcus's gaze fell on the money. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. Instead, he snapped the wallet shut, stood, and walked straight to the lost and found locker behind the desk. He placed the wallet inside, scribbled something on a form, and then returned to his seat, as though the thought of keeping it had never crossed his mind. Adrian felt a rush of respect. No wavering, no temptation. That was the kind of integrity you couldn't teach. The second test, the shortcut. A few nights later, Adrian set up another quiet trial. As Marcus prepared for his hourly patrol, Adrian joined him, pretending to be a fellow worker, covering maintenance. He suggested, casually, that they skip one of the far-off storage floors. No one ever goes up there anyway. Adrian said with a shrug. We could just mark it as checked and save ourselves half an hour. Marcus stopped in his tracks and looked at him squarely. That's not how it works, he said firmly. If I skip that floor and something happens, I'm responsible. Doesn't matter if nobody notices. I would know. My job is to protect this place, even if it feels pointless. His tone wasn't angry, but it carried conviction. He resumed his walk, flashlight sweeping across the walls, every corner receiving his attention. Adrian followed silently, hiding a smile. The young man's sense of duty was unshakable. The third test, the offer, a biggest test, came on a rainy Thursday night. The building was emptier than usual, the storm outside making the windows rattle. Marcus sat at his desk, notes spread before him, while Adrian leaned casually against the wall, pretending to be another restless employee passing time. Adrian lowered his voice. Hey, Marcus. Ever think about making extra money on the side? I know a guy who pays well for inside tips. Marcus's head jerked up. Tips? Yeah. Nothing major. Just schedules, who's in the building and when. That kind of stuff. Easy cash. Nobody gets hurt. Silence that followed was thick. Adrian studied Marcus's face, waiting. Marcus set his pencil down slowly. His voice, when it came, was calm but cold. You realize what you're suggesting, right? You're asking me to sell out the very place I'm paid to protect. Adrian shrugged, as though it were no big deal. I'm just saying, you could use the money. Doesn't have to be much. A few details here and there, who's gonna know? Marcus leaned forward, his jaw tight. I'll know. And let me be clear, if you're serious, I'd have to report you. I don't play games with that stuff, not now, not evermint. The storm outside seemed to echo the storm in Marcus's eyes. Adrian raised his hands in surrender, chuckling. Relax, man. I was kidding. Just testing if you were awake. Marcus didn't laugh. He shook his head and muttered, that's not funny. Some of us take this job seriously. He returned to his notes, but his posture remained rigid, as if the mere suggestion had left a bitter taste. Adrian felt a pang of guilt, even though it had only been a test. But beneath that guilt was pride. Marcus's answer had been clear, decisive, uncompromising. This was a man who could not be bought. The observation over the course of a week, Adrian kept watching. He saw Marcus offer his own umbrella to a janitor who had forgotten hers, choosing instead to get soaked himself during a stormy walk to the bus stop. He watched him greet every delivery worker by name, treating people with a respect that went unnoticed by most. And each night, after his rounds, Marcus returned to those same textbooks, eyelids heavy, but determination burning in his eyes. He didn't complain, he didn't boast, he just worked. Adrian found himself staying longer and longer, sometimes until dawn. Just to watch. He was no longer looking for flaws or weaknesses. He was simply absorbing the rare quality of a man who lived his values when no one was watching. The decision growing inside. By the end of the week, Adrian knew he couldn't remain silent forever. He had tested Marcus's honesty, his diligence, his loyalty, and each time, Marcus had risen above expectation. The image of that young man, hunched over faded books with a dying flashlight, had transformed into something bigger in Adrian's mind. It wasn't just about one guard. It was about potential. It was about giving someone the break he himself had once needed. But timing mattered. He couldn't just walk in one night and say, I'm the CEO, and I want to change your life. That moment had to be right. So he waited, watching Marcus scribble notes beneath the dim glow of the hallway light. He waited as the storm outside subsided, as the city beyond the windows slowly came alive with the first hints of dawn. And quietly, Adrian promised himself the time to reveal the truth was coming soon. And when it came, Marcus Reed's life would never be the same. The night was unusually still. The rain that had battered the city for 2 days had finally eased, leaving the streets outside glistening beneath the faint glow of street lamps. Inside the headquarters of Evershield Industries, the silence was deeper than usual, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Adrian Hale walked the familiar halls with a heaviness in his chest. For over a week now, he had lived a double life. CEO by day, silent observer by night. He had watched Marcus Reed prove himself time and time again, returning lost wallets untouched, refusing shortcuts, rejecting shady offers with unwavering conviction. Every test, every observation, had only reinforced what Adrian already knew. This was no ordinary employee. Tonight Adrian had made up his mind. The time for hiding was over. Marcus deserved to know the truth. He found Marcus in the same place as always. The security desk. His faded flashlight lay beside him, batteries nearly spent, while a thick textbook rested open beneath his weary hands. His pencil moved slowly, his eyelids heavy, but he pushed on. Tracing lines of law enforcement codes as though they were lifelines, Adrian paused in the doorway, studying him one last time as just a stranger. Then, with a quiet breath, he stepped inside. "Evening," Adrian said softly. Marcus looked up, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Back again. You really like wandering these halls, don't you?" Adrian chuckled, lowering himself into the chair across from him. "Maybe. Or maybe I just enjoy the company." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Company? Most people avoid me during these shifts." "Well," Adrian said, folding his hands on the desk, "I'm not most people." Something in his tone must have caught Marcus's attention, because the young guard leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity. "What do you mean by that?" Adrian hesitated. For a moment, he almost reverted to his cover. But then he remembered Marcus's father's words, the ones Marcus had repeated the night before. Character isn't shown when things are easy. It's shown when everything is stacked against you. If Marcus could live by truth, so could he. Adrian leaned forward. "Marcus. There's something you need to know about me. I haven't been completely honest with you." Marcus stiffened. His eyes flicked toward the monitors, then back to Adrian, suspicion creeping into his voice. "What do you mean?" Adrian pulled off his baseball cap, set it on the desk, and straightened his posture. The casual worker melting away, replaced by the weight of his true identity. His eyes, sharp and steady, met Marcus's. "My name is Adrian Hale," he said quietly. "I'm not a maintenance worker or a night employee. I'm the CEO of this company." The silence that followed was heavy. Broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Marcus blinked once. Then twice. He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're what? You're telling me you're the Adrian Hale? The guy whose name is on half the company buildings in this city?" Adrian gave a small nod. "That's me." Marcus's laughter died instantly, replaced by shock. His chair scraped back as he stood abruptly. "Wait, you're serious? You've been sitting here, talking to me, pretending to be someone else this whole time?" "Why?" Adrian rose too, his voice calm but firm. "Because I needed to see for myself what kind of people work for me. Not reports, not polished presentations. The truth. And when I saw you, studying here, pushing yourself night after night, I knew there was more to your story." When Marcus's face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and embarrassment. He rubbed the back of his neck, his voice low. "So what happens now? You're going to fire me. For what? Studying on the job?" Adrian stepped closer, his expression softening. "Fire you, Marcus? No. I didn't come here to punish you. I came here to thank you." Marcus blinked, confused. "Thank me? For what?" "For reminding me what this company is supposed to stand for," Adrian said. "Hard work. Integrity. Grit. I saw you with that wallet. You didn't think twice. I heard you refuse to cut corners. I even tested you with an offer I knew you'd never accept. And every time, you showed me the kind of man you are." Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes still wary. "You were testing me." "Yes," Adrian admitted. "And you passed every single one. Better than most executives in my boardroom would." For a long moment, Marcus just stood there, his fists curling slightly at his sides, caught between frustration and pride. Finally, he exhaled and sank back into his chair. "You don't get it. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just trying to survive. Trying to get through my shift, make some money, and keep studying so maybe, someday I can wear a badge." Adrian sat again, his eyes never leaving Marcus's. "I do get it. More than you know. Years ago, I was sitting in a chair just like yours, working 2 jobs, studying at night, barely scraping by. People laughed when I said I wanted to build something of my own. But I didn't stop. And neither have you." The words hung in the air, heavy and true. Marcus swallowed hard, his defenses cracking. "So what now?" he asked quietly. Adrian leaned forward, his voice steady. "Now, I want to help you. Not because I pity you, Marcus. but because I believe in you. I see in you the same fire I once carried. And I won't stand by and let that fire burn out in the shadows of a security office." Marcus's eyes glistened, though he quickly blinked the wetness away. "You're saying you'd what? Give me a chance?" Adrian's answer was immediate. "More than a chance. I want to sponsor your education. Pay for the courses you need. Get you into the academy, and when you graduate, you'll have a place here if you want it. Whether it's in corporate security or higher. You've earned that much and more." Go. For the first time since the conversation began, Marcus was speechless. His lips parted, but no words came out. His gaze dropped to the battered textbook before him. The one he had been clinging to like a lifeline. Slowly, almost disbelievingly, he ran his fingers over the cracked spine. "You'd really do that?" he whispered. Adrian's voice softened. "Yes. Because people like you are the reason this company exists. You are its backbone. And I refuse to let your dream die under a flickering flashlight." A long silence followed. Finally, Marcus let out a shaky laugh, half disbelief, half relief. His shoulders sagged as if years of weight had suddenly lifted. "Mr. Hale," he said, still shaking his head. "I don't even know what to say." Adrian smiled warmly. "Then don't say anything yet. Just keep doing what you've been doing, working hard, staying true. The rest will follow." In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not boss and employee, not CEO and guard, but two men who understood what it meant to fight uphill battles in the dark. And for Marcus Reed, the night that had begun like any other, with the quiet, staggering realization that his life had just changed forever. Months passed, but Marcus Reed never forgot that night. The night his world shifted on its axis. The memory of Adrian Hale sitting across from him, revealing his true identity, and then offering to invest in his future felt surreal, like something from a dream. Yet it wasn't a dream. Within weeks, Adrian had followed through on every promise. Marcus was enrolled in the courses he needed to complete his degree. The cost, once an impossible mountain, was no longer his burden. Evershield covered it in full. For the first time in years, Marcus could study without the weight of debt crushing his shoulders. But Adrian's help wasn't just financial. He checked in on Marcus often, sometimes in person. Sometimes through quick messages of encouragement. It wasn't the hovering of a benefactor. It was the support of a mentor who genuinely believed in him. Marcus pushed himself harder than ever. His nights were still long, filled with study sessions that stretched into the early hours. But now, instead of exhaustion alone, he carried a sense of hope. Hope that the hours he poured into the books weren't in vain. Hope that his father's legacy might live on through him. The graduation day, the day of his graduation from the academy, was one Marcus would never forget. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as rows of cadets, dressed in crisp uniforms, waited to receive their certificates. Families filled the seats, cameras flashing, proud tears glistening. Marcus stood tall in his uniform, the polished badge on his chest gleaming under the stage lights. He had made it. Every long night, every sacrifice, every scribbled note in the margins of faded textbooks, it had all led here. As his name was called, Marcus walked across the stage, his heart pounding. He shook hands with the academy officials, accepted his certificate, and turned toward the audience. And there, in the front row, he saw her. His mother. She was on her feet, hands clasped over her mouth, tears spilling freely. Her boy, the one she had worried over for years, was standing proud in uniform, ready to serve. But beside her sat another figure. Adrian Hale. Not in a tailored suit this time, but dressed simply, blending in among the crowd. Yet he clapped the loudest, his smile wide, his eyes shining with pride. Marcus's gaze locked with Adrian's, and for a moment, the noise of the crowd faded. It was just the two of them, two men who had once shared a dimly lit security office, one hunched over books, the other watching silently from the shadows. Marcus gave the slightest nod. And Adrian returned it. No words were needed. A quiet conversation afterward. After the ceremony, families spilled into the courtyard, laughter and celebration filling the air. Marcus found his mother first, wrapping her in a hug that left them both breathless. She whispered through tears, "Your father would be so proud of you." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat thick. "I hope so, Mom, I really hope so." When they pulled apart, Adrian stepped forward. For a moment, Marcus felt the weight of who this man truly was, Not just his benefactor, not just the CEO. But the one who had believed in him when no one else had. You made it, Adrian said, his voice warm. Marcus shook his head. No, we made it, I wouldn't be here without you. Adrian's eyes softened. Don't give me the credit. You did the work. You kept pushing when it would have been easier to quit. I just gave you the chance you already deserved. Marcus stood a little taller, the words sinking deep. Still, thank you. Not just for the money, for seeing me. For not letting me stay invisible. Adrian placed a hand on his shoulder. Marcus, you were never invisible. Sometimes it just takes someone else to hold up a mirror so we can see what's already there. A life with new purpose. The weeks that followed were a blur of new beginnings. Marcus accepted a position offered by Adrian, not just as a guard, but as part of Evershield's corporate security training program. By day, he trained alongside seasoned professionals, learning strategy, leadership, and risk management. By night, he still returned to the streets of his community, volunteering at youth centers, speaking to teenagers about discipline, integrity, and chasing their dreams. He became more than just a graduate. He became a role model. People noticed the change. The shy young man who once studied in silence beneath a failing flashlight now spoke with confidence. His voice carrying the weight of both struggle and triumph. His mother's pride grew with each passing day, her eyes lighting up every time she saw him in uniform. And Adrian. He continued to watch Marcus's journey with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had seen potential fulfilled. The reflection one evening, months later, Marcus stood outside the same building where it all began. The security office was still there, the desk still neatly arranged, the monitors still flickering. He stepped inside, running his fingers over the edge of the desk, where he had once leaned, scribbling notes in exhaustion. The old flashlight lay tucked in the drawer, long since replaced, but Marcus had kept it. To anyone else, it was just a useless, broken object. But to him, it was a symbol. A reminder of the nights he fought for his dream in silence, and of the stranger who had seen him in that silence and chosen to believe. Adrian joined him a moment later, the two men standing side by side in the small familiar room. Funny, isn't it? Adrian said quietly. How a place like this can hold so much meaning. Marcus smiled faintly. This desk, these books, they were my whole world once. And then you walked in, and everything changed. Adrian shook his head gently. No, Marcus. You changed. I just gave you a chance to see yourself the way I saw you. The two stood in silence for a while, the hum of the monitors filling the space. Finally, Marcus turned to Adrian, his voice steady. One day, I want to do for someone else what you did for me. Find the ones who are fighting quietly, the ones no one notices. I want to give them hope. Adrian's smile was proud and full. And that, Marcus, is how the cycle continues. That's how lives are transformed. One act of belief at a time. The ending. As they left the building together, Marcus glanced back one last time at the office. The faint glow of the hallway light spilling across the desk. He no longer needed the flashlight. The path before him was lit. Not just by opportunity, but by faith, perseverance. And the promise that even in the darkest hours, someone might see you and believe. And because one man had seen him, Marcus Reed's life had been transformed forever.